Can everybody see that? Okay.
Yes.
Can you see down here in my console too? Where I'm typing stuff, just because sometimes that gets a little hidden. Okay, so first off, let's go ahead and load tidyverse. So you can either do it this way, so you can click here and then it'll load it. The other thing you can do too, I'll go ahead and start a new script here. The other thing you can do too is just do library and then tidyverse, and then just run this. Either way works. And you notice that kind of everything pops in afterwards. One thing too, I know that a few of you have had difficulty loading up the tidyverse. If the tidyverse is giving you static, you can just go ahead and look for ggplot. See the ggplot 2 here. Just go ahead and load ggplot. That's all you're going to need for today. And then for the Tibble stuff, there's actually there's a package called Tibble. So if you need to work with Tibble and the tidyverse isn't working for whatever reason, you can just go at it that way. If you're still having trouble loading the tidyverse, maybe set up a time with myself or a Danielle, and we'll kind of troubleshoot it. I'm gonna troubleshoot it to try to figure out what's going on. But that's kind of the best way. Well, you got to figure out how to get the tidyverse on. So if you're having problems with that, let's figure out how to take care of that. Okay. So first thing is load tidyverse. So second is we're going to be learning to work plot. So the first thing you want to do is go to my website. And then today we're doing, so if you look under graphs, it's just this, I'm an intro to a ggplot, and that's what I'm going to be going through and kind of teaching about today. ggplot is a graphics language, and it has a certain code set up to it. It's probably one of the harder codes we work with because there's a little bit more, I mean, it's not technical, but it does take a little bit more time to master. So kind of pay attention. A lot about learning code is kind of figuring out kind of the system or the way in which they set up things. So there's kind of a certain logic to how it works. And kind of as we've been doing so far, a lot of what we want to try to do is we practice. Learning code and learning how to do code for statistics is just about practice. So it's about both kind of cutting and pasting things in, but then also just kind of playing with the code, like changing little things here and there to do something different, and then seeing what works and what doesn't work. And anytime your code doesn't work, great. It's just a chance to learn something new. It happens all the time. Nobody's code is ever perfect. We're always kind of making little mistakes or forget a comma or whatever. It will tell you at times if there's a problem with the code in your script. You'll see a little X in red if R is detecting something wrong, and so that can kind of help at times. And then you can sometimes look through the error message that you get. Sometimes one thing I like to do a lot is I'll actually Google the error message. And so sometimes you can get some help there. And then of course, but the big thing is you run into a problem, especially if you're getting frustrated, stop, get something to drink, relax, pet your dog, whatever it takes. And then just take a screenshot, send it to myself or Danielle, and we'll help you figure it out. Okay, so we're going to be using my my website, but then we're also going to be using this book called R for Data Science. So I'll kind of show you that too. So most of what I've done, I've kind of adapted from R for a data science. And this is a completely online book. It's one of the best kind of introductions, primarily to the tidyverse, but also to R in general. And I use this all the time. I think we're doing primarily stuff from the data visualization part. Yeah. So if you want to do some more practice, they have a couple different exercises you can do here, and you'll see. So it's chapter 3 from R for Data Science, and you'll see that there's a lot of the same sorts of stuff that I take most of what I do from my lesson from this one as well. Okay, we got tidy loaded. And then, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at one of the data sets that we'll be using today. The data set for today is going to be called MPG. So it's basically a data set of cars. So if you loaded tidyverse, MPG should be a part of tidyverse. So you should see it show up. So just type in MPG, and then you'll see it come up. So if you look here, so here I can show it here, but then I can also just go view MPG, and then we'll show it up here as well. But it's basically kind of several different kinds of cars, the model, the gasoline displacement, year it was made, the amount of cylinders, transmission, so on and so forth. So it gives you a lot of different sorts of things. So we can either view the data set, or we can kind of look at it down here. The other thing that we can do here is if you put a question mark, basically, if you put a question mark in front of anything, it's if R has any information about it, it will show you that information. So here I'm just going to type in, I'll actually add this up here. There you go. So, most questions about the data set. So what you do is you put a question mark and then MPG. And that's going to give you kind of an overview down here. And it gives, so it gives information about the different variables that you have, year, cylinder, transmission, so on and so forth. And then just kind of gives you, so it's fuel economy data from 1999, way back in 1999, to 2008. Okay, so what we're going to start talking about today and what we're going to go back to a lot are what are called different levels of measurement. And levels of measurement is the kind of variable that you're working with. And different kinds of variables have different types of attributes. So the one that we've kind of looked at so far would be one is a character. And a character variable is really more like names of things. And then also I'm a numeric. And numeric means it's some kind of a number. And that's what we've been working with so far. But when we move into a statistics as a field, there's kind of several more different types of variables. And the way that we categorize variables is the first category. Oops, not necessarily. I'm going to move in a little bit on this. So in terms of levels of measurement, the first distinction we make is between categorical variables and continuous variables. Categorical variables are exactly what they sound. It is a particular category, So if you think about like different brands of shoes, different types of computers, different types of clothing manufacturers, any kind of thing where you categorize something, different types of religions, different types of schools you might go to, anything that you would place something into a certain bin, that is called a categorical variable. Now, the most basic kind of categorical variable is a binary variable. And a binary variable, or bi, which stands for 2, would mean that it's anything that is one of 2 things. So the most easiest one is something like I'm a male versus female. Also, you can think about it in terms of like a yes or no answer to a particular question, or a yes and no answer if you're voting for a certain bill. That'd be a binary variable. So any variable that only has 2 options would be a binary variable. The second level would be what's called a nominal variable. And a nominal variable is a type of categorical variable that's based on certain names. So you name something based on what it is. So for example, when we look back to what we are working with in terms of COVID, let's even type in, let's go ahead and look at structure for COVID. So we have countries. So countries would be a nominal or a categorical variable. So it's a names for different types of countries. So you have the United States, India, Brazil, Russia, so on and so forth. Most of the time when you're working with R, this is going to come up as a character variable. And it's going to have this shortened version of a CHR. The other type of a categorical variable that we often work with is called a factor. And a factor is typically used because it's based on certain levels. So you have like different amounts of something, or different types of categories, or those types of things. So the other one that you'll often see is called factor. Okay, any questions so far? Danielle, is there anything you want to add?
Sure. So even though we're talking about it right now, you can see he's written you guys kind of like a short little novel here underneath, where you can always come back and double check what each level of measurement is. There is one in the second paragraph that's not listed above called ordinal, which is also part of categorical. And he can go over that right now, but if you ever want to review, this is where you would find it.
Great, yeah, thank you so much. So the point of the website in terms of the class is those are your reading assignments. So in terms of understanding Intro to ggplot, you're expected to be reading the website as I kind of talk about, well, not reading it while I'm lecturing, but outside of class, this is where you should be kind of reviewing these things, because this is what you're going to be tested over. So coming up, there'll be some kind of a quiz over different levels of measurement. You have to be able to identify what are the different levels of measurement based on what types of properties that they have. Okay, any questions though so far? Let's see, let me make sure. Yeah, I've got chat up too. Okay. So the one that Daniel just mentioned, the ordinal variable, that's the one that has a certain order to it. Okay, so an ordinal variable is based on certain categories that has some kind of order to it. But there's no real direct distinction in terms of numbers between the ordering. So for example, if you have some kind of a race, say you're running like a 5K, and someone comes in first, someone comes in second, and someone comes in third, there's not going to be an equal distance in time between first, second, and third. The first person would come in, The next person might come in, say like 2 minutes after that. The third person might come in 5 minutes after that, but there's no equal distance in terms of the rankings. So that's what's called an ordinal variable, and that's closest to what we'll call a factor later on. When we move into continuous variables, those are more of the numbers. So we're primarily talking about different numbers that we use to kind of represent some kind of measurement. So in a interval variable, these also have rankings, but there's an equal distance between the rankings. And what that tells us is that there's some kind of, so if we think about like a Fahrenheit scale, there's an equal distance between each of the different degrees that we have. And that would be what's called an interval scale. But however, a interval scale does not have an absolute 0 point. So like, for example, in the Fahrenheit scale, you can have negative numbers. Anything that you could have negative numbers it is an interval scale. So the interval scale still has rankings, just like the ordinal scale, but now each of those rankings has an equal distance between each rank itself. So that's what makes the difference between an ordinal scale and an interval scale. Then finally, a ratio scale. A ratio scale is one that still has equal intervals, but it has an absolute 0 point. So the Kelvin temperature scale doesn't have negative numbers, and it has an absolute 0 point. So that'd be a type of ratio scales. Ratio scales you can also do more types of multiplication with as well. So a ratio is kind of is in a sense the hardest number, or we think about in terms of the most exact kind of number. Okay, questions here. Okay, so let's go ahead and start and try to do our first ggplot. And we'll start with, so I'm going to write down first ggplot here. And what I want to do is to try to give you kind of the basic code for this. So the first thing we do is we do ggplot, which kind of makes sense. And then next we specify what data am I going to use. Okay. So in this case, we're going to use the MPG data, because remember that's kind of that car data that we were talking about earlier. So what this is this is the first element of a ggplot. So the first thing you do with your ggplot is, of course, you have to say, I'm going to make a ggplot, and then you specify what the data is going to be. Now, after that, we add a plus sign. And what ggplot does is it uses plus signs to kind of add in the different elements. So basically, the way that a ggplot works is it takes several different elements and kind of puts them all together. So the first kind of ggplots that we'll learn are more basic. And then as we learn more about how to use ggplot, we add more and more stuff over time. So first, I know what data I'm going to use. Next, I want to put geom. And what geom stands for basically what geometrical feature or object are you going to use to describe this particular data set. So the geom is basically what's the shape going to look like? What's going to be the basic thing we're going to use? So for this first one, it's going to be geom point, because we're going to use points to describe, to actually do this first graphic. Okay, so next we use what's called mapping. And mapping is just telling you what variables are you going to map onto this particular of a geometrical object. And that's going to be specified in what's called this AES. So do AES, a parentheses, and then we specify what's going to be on the x-axis, and that's going to be the displacement variable. And then on the y-axis, that's where we're going to put highway. And once you're done, you can go ahead and run that code. And then there you have your first ggplot. So notice on my x-axis, well, so the x-axis is always your horizontal axis, and the y-axis is always your vertical axis. And so now we have different levels of engine, of a gasoline displacement, and then how many highway miles that each of them make. And so we'll see kind of a certain pattern that's occurring within this graph. Let's see, so displacement, yeah. So the DISPL is the amount of engine displacement, and then the HWY means highway miles per gallon. All right, questions so far? Are we getting it?
Something?
Sure.
So when you're doing the code, you guys will have figured this out by now. When you have specific variables that are attributed to the data set. So we already know that the data equals MPG. That's in our code. When we specify what our x-axis and what our y-axis is going to be, we need to make sure that it's spelled the same. You guys will have picked up on this by now, but that's really important. So especially in a data set that you may not be familiar with, it's okay to double check yourself. Or if you get an error, that might be something that's common. You want to make sure that you're spelling it according to the data set.
Good. Yeah. Thanks. Okay. Now, for the most part, so that's kind of our first ggplot. And then so what we can do with ggplot from there is basically kind of add more and more features to either show more variables, add more different kinds of color to make our graphs look better, or find different ways of kind of explaining the data. So when we look at this first part, we can see that the general trend we see in these variables is that as displacement goes up, so as you go up in a displacement, the highway mileage actually goes down. So the more engine displacement that takes place, or the more gasoline that an engine takes up, obviously your gas mileage would go down. And that's kind of that's the pattern that we see in this particular graph. Each one of these points is kind of standing for one of the observations that we see. So for this person, they had about a level of 5 liters of displacement, and then their highway miles are about 15, it looks like. And so that's the way that we kind of read this a particular chart or this particular plot. And the idea would be that it's forming a kind of pattern. And what we're looking for when we're using graphs like this is trying to look at what is the overall pattern that we're seeing within this data set. And what we see is this general trend that as your engine or fuel displacement goes down, your highway mileage goes up. And then the opposite is true as well. As your engine displacement goes up, your highway mileage goes down. This is what's sometimes known as a as a negative relationship or a inverse of a type of relationship. Okay, questions here. Now, what you'll notice is that although most of the dots kind of fit this pattern here, there's this group of dots that doesn't really fit it, meaning that as it goes up, it looks like there's a group of dots that their highway mileage actually goes up to a certain extent rather than going down. So one of the things we can do is we can add in other variables to help us try to answer the question of why we see this pattern here when it seems like everything else is going on in this particular area. So to do that, we're going to add this variable of class. And so class, let me kind of go ahead and look at it here. And so class is kind of the different types of cars that we have. So we have compact cars, SUVs, midsize, and so on and so forth. And so what we want to see is there something about the class of car that might be having an effect on why we're seeing this pattern here? So for our second ggplot, let's add in the variable class. Okay, what kind of variable is class, would you say? How about Stephanie? What kind of variable is class? You can go back up to.
And he means in terms of levels of measurement.
Hold on, sorry, I'm reading it.
That's all right. So one thing to think about is what class is basically different types of cars, different types of cars.
Honestly, I don't know.
Okay. Anybody else want to take a stab?
Is it categorical?
Who said that?
Shalom?
Shalom. Good. Yes. Right. It's a categorical variable, right? One way to know this, if we go back to show on structure, if we go to structure, so remember, structure tells us about the different kinds of variables that we have. So if we go to structure, when we go to class, see how it's a character? Anytime it's a character, it's got to be some type of a categorical variable. So anytime you see a character here, it's got to be some kind of a categorical variable. And that's because you can only put these different cars into different bins, into different types of categories. So any variable, see, that's like that, but there's no kind of way to kind of measure between it, or there's no measurement. That would be, in this case, it'd be a nominal variable within the categorical subtype. Yeah, Laura.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to ask if it was nominal or not, but you answered that already.
No, yeah. So nominal is a type of a categorical variable. I'll often kind of refer to them kind of as a categorical variable because it's easy to think about different types of categories, I think. But technically, this would be a nominal variable.
Yeah, think of categorical and continuous as like umbrellas.
Right.
And then when you think about everything under the umbrella of what is categorical would be binary, nominal, and ordinal. And then under the umbrella of continuous would be interval and ratio.
Okay, let's see. How about a candy? What type of variable is a highway or a highway gas mileage?
Give me a second.
Sure.
And the question was, well, what variable?
What's that? Yeah. What kind of what type of levels of measurement would it be?
An additional variable?
An additional variable? No. Well, so think about it in terms of this. Is there an equal distance between the different levels? I mean, is there an equal distance between 20 and 22 miles and 30 and 32 miles?
Yes.
Yes.
22 and 32, yes.
Good. Is there is there such thing as negative miles? Can you have negative miles?
No.
Good. So there's an absolute 0 point, and there's an equal distance between your ranks. So what kind of levels of measurement would it be? Still not sure?
Still not sure.
All right, anybody else?
Yeah, it will be a ratio variable.
Good. So a ratio variable, as long as there's an absolute 0 point, and as long as there's equal distances, then it's going to be a ratio. Good. How about a displacement? What kind of variable is a displacement? So just use the same logic we just used. Is there an equal distance between each level of engine displacement? And can you have negative? Yeah, somebody say something?
When it comes to cars, what exactly does displacement mean?
It's the amount of a gasoline taken up by the engine.
Okay, so would it be ratio 2 then?
Yep. Exactly right. And see, if you look here, notice how there's no negatives. It's in liters. Liters is kind of is a particular number, and so this would be another example of a ratio variable. Right? Any questions on those on the variables there? So part of what we'll be doing is trying to kind of I'm gonna look through and think about what kind of variables are we actually looking at. Okay, so now let's do our second ggplot and let's add in this a second variable. So once again, we'll go ggplot first, and then we'll do our data, which is going to be miles per. The MPG. Then we're going to add in GM point. We're going to construct our graphs based on little points there. Then mapping to our aesthetic. It's going to be X is going to be displacement. So we're doing the same elements as we did before. And then Y is going to be equal to highway. And so notice this time what we're going to do is we're going to add in color. And so color, we're going to say color up based on the class variable. Go ahead and send that down. And then we click that. We run this code, and notice how we have all of our class here is actually going to be represented here on the side. Okay, so we have two-seater, compact, mid-size, all these different kinds, and then those show up on our graph. So the way that we answer this question of why do these dots seem to have higher highway mileage but more gasoline displacement, and that's because most of these are actually two-seaters. So they're a smaller car. They're not going to take up as much. So the gasoline output will not be as strong because it doesn't take as much gasoline power because they're smaller vehicles. And so that's why you see this change here. Okay, questions? Now, the other thing we can do is we can kind of add different things to our graphs to make them look better or cleaner. So now let's do another ggplot, and now we're just going to change the color of the dots or points that we have. So same thing, ggplot. Data equals RPG. We still want it to be this geom point. Mapping, and then AES. So everything's going to be the same. But now this time, we're going to go outside of these two variables that we are specifying. And we're going to write in color out here. And then we'll just call it blue. So then we run that. Now we've changed our colors to blue. So go ahead and take a second and just you can play around with changing the color. One thing, when you're using RStudio or even R, if you press the up arrow, you'll get the code that you just used. So I can bring this code right back up, and then I can type in yellow, and then run it again.
That's when you're in the console. So anytime that you want to use your arrows, you can toggle back through past coding, like you're saying. That you can do in the console. If you do that in the script, you'll just move your cursor around.
Huh, I don't know why that didn't work. There we go. You can do red, you can do, just go ahead and just play with that for a second. Green. It doesn't have all colors, but show up as well. So yeah, just going to give you several different options. And of course, as you learn how to do a ggplot more and more, you can do more of these types of changes to it. So then let's change the color. I find ggplot. So this time I'm just going to copy and paste this just to make it easier. And then I'll go ahead and change the color to red. That kind of standing out pretty well.
You want to also show them how to toggle through the graphs?
Oh yeah, thanks. So on your plots here, you'll see there's an arrow in the upper left-hand corner. If you hit that, you can go back through all your different plots that you've done for that on a particular session. So I can go back and look at anything that I've done so far. I don't know why that one didn't show up, but all right. So the big thing though with this code is when color is inside these brackets. So when color is inside the brackets right after AES, then it will produce the graph where you have that third variable added. Oops. So it'll produce this graph here. But when you move color outside of that, then you're actually just specifying what type of color you can make your particular dots. Okay. Now for the next type of a ggplot that we're going to use, we need to get what's called the diamonds data set. So now we're going to bring up the diamonds data set, which is also part of the tidyverse. So click on, so type in diamonds, it should show up here. Oops. And so this is just a data set of, just like it says, diamonds. So you have the different carats of the diamonds, what type of cut they have, the color, clarity, see price, so on and so forth. If you want more information, if you need more info on diamonds data set, then once again, we just use that a question mark, type in diamonds. Oh, whoops. And then it'll tell us, so this is these are the prices of over 50,000 round cut diamonds. Then here again, it specifies all the different types of variables that we're actually looking at. Okay, so this time we're going to do a ggplot bar graph. So we start with ggplot. And this time our data is going to be diamonds. And then this time we're going to do geom, but this time we're going to do a bar because it's a geometrical shape we're going to use. So then we to do mapping, and then AES. And this time we're going to do X equals, X equals cut. That's going to be the cut of the diamonds. Okay, so we run that. And notice how now we have basically the count for all these different types of diamond cuts. So ideal has the largest number, obviously, of different types of cuts. Premium, see very good, good, fair, see so on and so forth. Now, I do want to show you a couple things on this one. So the way that this works in terms of what R is doing is it's taking this a particular data set. So here, so remember that we specified data set here, and then it transforms this data set into a count. So basically just looks at, okay, here's all these different types of counts, and it counts how many of, say, the diamonds are fair, how many are good, how many are very good, so on and so forth. And then it takes that, puts that on the x-axis, and then puts the count on the y-axis. So for this type of geom bar, this is kind of the default setting, if you will. Now, and then if you look here at a cut, notice how this is a what kind of variable is a cut, would you say? How about
Would it be categorical?
Yep, exactly right. Yep. It'd be either categorical or nominal. Either one works because it's different categories. There's no real numerical difference between the different types of categories. It's just in a category or not. So either categorical or nominal works. Okay, let's see. All right. So now I want to kind of show you basically the other way that we can use or develop a particular type of bar graph. And to do that, we're going to use kind of a really quick and easy kind of a data set. So we're going to write up, we're going to create the example data set. So just call this example. And then we're going to create a tribble. And for that tribble, we're going to have group. And we're going to have number. And then we'll have group, oops, group 1. There's going to be 30 in that group. And then in group 2, we'll have 50 in that group. So then we'll create this little tribble here real quick. And then we'll just kind of make sure that it's there. So I'll type an example down here really quick. Notice how that's all showed up nice and good, but then I can also view it up here. Will show me that same thing. Okay, so now notice how if I try to do the ggplot just like the one above, so here's my data set, which is going to be the example. Then I do the geom bar mapping, and then I do x equals group. Notice what happens when I run this. So notice how this kind of creates a graph, but it doesn't tell me anything. Okay. The reason this doesn't work is because I've got two groups here, but it's not a categorical variable in the sense of it's not something that you can count. So with the diamonds variable, you had so many different examples of ideal, so many different examples of a premium cut, and so on and so forth. And so the count was located within the variable itself, if you will. Now for this kind of example, and we're going to see a lot of examples like this, the count is located in a second variable. So that's why in order to make this kind of graph work, we have to add one more argument, or I should say, we have to add one more element. So in order to make this type of graph work, to fix the bar graph, we do the same thing here. Except we have to specify what our y variable is going to be. Of course, our y variable is going to be number. But then also we have to tell R what kind of stat to use. And in this case, it's going to be what's called identity. And identity is basically just the number in a second variable. So when I run this, oh, here's a good example. So notice how it's not working here. It says there's an unexpected symbol in here. So when I look up here, though, what's actually, it's not necessarily an unexpected symbol. It's that I need a comma. Because the comma is going to separate out this part of our code from this part. So once I add that in, that should work. There we go. So yeah, so notice how now the bar graph actually works, because I have a group 2 and then group 1. Group 2 had 50, group 1 had 30, so now it actually works. And so this is kind of, as we're first learning how to do these kind of bar graphs, this is kind of one of the things to actually think about. If you have a categorical variable that already has the number in the variable, meaning that there's already, a certain number of each type of category in there, then you can do and set it up this way with just one on the x-axis. But when you need a second variable, which in this case is going to be a y variable, to kind of indicate what those numbers are, what that frequency is, that's when you need to add in what your y variable should be. And then you need this stat, or a different kind of stat than count, which is going to be identity. Okay, questions there? Okay, so now that we've gone through everything, let me go through what you need to work on for homework. Yeah, statistics. Okay, so here's our assignment. Okay, sorry, I forgot to change the inner dates on that. I'll have to work on that for this weekend. Okay, so what you need to do for your assignment that'll be due on Tuesday is to create a scatter plot, which is that a geom point that we've been doing that compares engine displacement, or the DSPL, to the city miles per gallon. So this is, of course, really similar to what we already do. And then add in class as that third variable. And then do the exact same thing we did before, create a bar graph of the variable color in the diamonds data set. And then create a bar graph of the variable total cases from the database that you just created on the COVID numbers for counties in California. All right. Any questions on your homework assignments? see, I don't think we have a quiz yet. I think we're still just doing lessons. Yeah, descriptive statistics, we'll start with that. Oh, yeah. Okay, so for next week, I'm sorry, the quiz will actually be on a Thursday, so don't need to worry about that right now. So for next week, for Tuesday, just make sure that you do your homework assignment number 3, and then you'll be good to go. Let's see, if you want to do a little work first and then kind of check things out with myself and Danielle, we'll kind of sit here online, and you can kind of ask us questions if you want to try to work through some stuff. If you feel kind of good enough and you feel good to go, then you're free to leave, and we'll just see you on Tuesday. So
Thank
you
you.
turn in both the script and the graphs. So you turn in both.
Yeah, they can take either a screenshot of the graph if that's easier, or there is a way to save it under export.
Yeah.
So you can save it as an image, and that'll save it as like a JPEG or something like that. And you can upload it as a separate picture.